I remember back in the day, the fight that really got me into the UFC was Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen. And as an individual that hadn't really seen the UFC, it was really the promotions and the trash talking and the narratives that were built that really got me excited for this fight. And obviously, there are a little bit of parallels here, but in recent history, the bad blood or the played up bad blood, as it almost turned out to be, between Israel Adesanya and Paulo Costa, really hammed this fight card up and really propelled it to exceptional heights. Culminating in some really amazing numbers, at least from a social media perspective there. But look, let's talk about the fight there. And man, this was vintage Israel Adesanya at his best. I've actually done a bit of a technique and fight analysis on Israel Adesanya's style. So please, check out some of the videos in the channel and like and subscribe if you already haven't, please. We've got some great content lined up. But really, this was vintage Adesanya at his best. And it really got me thinking, there was a lot of criticism from Israel Adesanya about fans that were calling him a hype job and how he loved being called a hype job. But he really made a good point in the press conference in terms of Paulo Costa. And I really think now, upon dissecting it and taking it back, we really need to be careful about our and O's. And O's meaning the undefeated fighters and the level of progression that we give that. Kamzat Chimaev is maybe another one that we probably need to just maybe pump the brakes a little bit. Not to say that these guys are the next new thing, but to this fight specifically, I think there were a lot of narratives, but we really saw the well-rounded, multi-dimensional style bending techniques that Israel Adesanya has. And really, he is in another level of elite level of striking, compounded by his feints and movements. And we saw this early on. And, the Israel Adesanya playbook is to touch you early with leg kicks, right? He uses it to establish distance. And at the same time, just to see what feints he'll bite on and what reactions he'll get. So he went on this pretty early on, and interestingly enough, Paulo Costa was, playing it up, hamming it up for the cameras just to say, look, hit me, it doesn't really hurt. And over and over, we saw Israel Adesanya go to that same leg again and again and again. And as Paulo was, prodding forward, he was just a singular target. And there were times in that first round, and we saw a lot of these throughout this card in terms of really, strikes being concentrated in a single area. Jan versus Dominic, for example, on the side of Dominic. On Izzy's, Paulo Costa's rather lead leg, you saw almost like a pepperoni pizza imprint there. It was that red, and he was chopping it like a wood chopper again and again. And look, this is a technique we see, some of the best strikers use, and Izzy is up there, if not one of the best strikers. And really, he was immobilizing. Paulo Costa and touching him. And interestingly enough, in the first round, it wasn't only that. It wasn't only the kicks, though short side kick to the leg was really prominent in there. But he was throwing switch kicks and a lot of different kicks. And this is what I've seen with Israel Adesanya. Depending on the opponent that he's versing and the respect for his power, he will determine the level of recklessness, if that makes sense, that he will engage with. And really, there was respect for Paulo Costa's power. As a result, he was touching him from the side and really working towards that. Another thing that we saw in the first round that really did manifest was the speed difference. Israel Adesanya is on another level. And the speed difference is, there is obviously natural reaction there, but we could see time and time again, Paulo Costa was swinging and missing. And a lot of this was the two different distances that Israel was fighting this fight. And he does do this across a lot of, his opponents. And initially, he was, establishing that length that he often has. And really, every time I see Israel, I just can't help think the John Jones comparisons in terms of how they fight and how leg-centric and how defensively he is an absolute maestro, impossible to hit. There's a lot of, parallels there. But, harkening back to this fight, Costa was missing quite a bit with these fights, and there were a lot of misses that Costa had initially in the first round that were due to pure reaction speed, and there were a lot of distance misses rather that were just footwork, just the stance switch, just the ability for him to combine both of these techniques together and really get Paulo frustrated. And I think at the conclusion of the first round, we saw a very while not necessarily on his face, we could see a frustrated Paulo Costa, noting that this was going to be a tough night. into the second round, and Izzy had obviously paid dividends with the kicks that he was doing. And time and time again, you see the same narratives play full. But what was different, the difference is, I think you saw Izzy, he was seeing Paulo not necessarily slow down, but those leg kicks do accumulate over time, and maybe compromise is the right word. He was changing the distance of the fight, and he moved from the first round, where it was a little more at length bay, to close encounters in the pocket. And Izzy does this very well, where because he's concentrated a lot of his attacks to the leg, he's now moved to the top. And we saw this popping jab, really, the full extension of the Israel Adesanya jab, which is amazing to watch, coupled with his natural sort of speed, pop Paulo Costa back. And really the fight ending sequence was almost, I've got to look at the tape again, but almost really close to what happened with Robert Whittaker, in that it was a slip and rip exchange in the pocket. And interestingly enough, there were two versions of this that happened. And in the first one, Paulo had a really, sort of high guard there, and he was able to absorb it. But it was in the pocket. It was, a slip, a rip, maybe 3/4 or half of it kind of went through. But in the second one, Israel did a very similar sort of execution, I think. And again, the movement now has changed. The distance has changed. He is now in the pocket as opposed to at distance. And this is the maestro that is Israel Adesanya, the conductor of striking, and the epiphany and the culmination of all these techniques come through. And a Paulo Costa that just had not seen this diversity of strikes. He was just not able to. He only had one sort of way, and you can say that's the way he fights. He came in, Israel finished this sort of sequence and clipped him on the temple, and it was over. When Paulo Costa, landed to the ground, we saw a flurry of strikes, and it was over. And the post-fight celebrations were interesting, to say the least. But my, is Israel Adesanya really carving out a legacy for himself as a stand-up fighter? He's exceptional. What are the deficiencies that you can kind of pick out of his game? Could he have more power? I mean, could everyone have more power? Absolutely. But precision beats power, as the cliche goes. And he's shown that time and time again. And I really think an individual that beats Izzy has to do one of two things. Has to out-grapple him, take him to the ground, potentially submit him, or has to really apply insane amounts of pressure to really disrupt rhythm. Because if you're going to allow Izzy to lead the dance, you are going to lose the dance. But Israel Adesanya, kudos to you, my man. You're representing Oceania, New Zealand, Aotearoa, all those fighters really sort of well. Wow, it's interesting. I'm not too sure what's next for Izzy. Sorry, I am. He called out Jared Cannonier. That's an interesting fight. But honestly, I see Cannonier as a slightly more evolved version of Paulo Costa. Maybe not quite, head forward, some adjustments there. But my mind's with Jones, because the parallels between Israel Adesanya and John Jones is interesting. So that, to me, as a fight, makes absolute sense. Like, at what weight? Let's get a catch weight. Like, why does it have to be? I mean, it's not for title implications. These are fights that people want to see, and I think that you had the baddest motherfucker belt over there. Why did you do? I don't know. I can't think of a cool belt name right now, but I think that's the fight to make. And Izzy wanted it. Was it 2021? I'm not too sure. I'm gonna have to check. But lo and behold, that's next year. Look, guys, that's my summation of the fight. If you liked what you saw and what you heard, please give us a thumbs up, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please support the channel, and chat soon. Peace.